You just said that the guy you hired didn't have your values. Why didn't you guys check his values before you hired him?
We screwed up, man.
Really?
We didn't do a good job. We didn't do a good job.
Are there like conservative Americans who are like, oh, I'm not gonna buy any more of your guys' ice cream,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
and you guys don't care?
You know, not you know, if you're values led, you're values led. And if you don't do something that alienates some people or challenges, you're not really challenging the system. So, you know, that has to be part of what you do. I sometimes say I instead of having 1,000 customers who know about our company, I want to have 100 of them who love our company. And to me, that's a real, you know, you have to take sides on these issues.
All right, we're in Berlin. New episode of Young and Naive. And who are you?
My name is Jeff Furman. I'm visiting Berlin for the first time.
What do you do?
What do I do for work, or what do I do in my whole life? I'll focus a little bit on work. I'm here in that capacity. I'm here. I'm chair of the board of Ben & Jerry's, and I'm here to hang out with the folks that are working for our company in Germany, and we're here to talk among ourselves of the best way the company can maintain its heritage and social mission here in Germany. And I've been with the company since it began 40 years ago, and so I'm trying to do my best to bring our legacy here to Germany.
So when you say you're the chairman, are you the boss of the whole thing?
Well, I would like to think so, but in title, no, I'm not. So there's a CEO, so there's chair of the board of directors, and it's a very unique board of directors in two ways. One, it's made up of activists, not typical business professionals. So the head of Greenpeace USA is on our board. People who are doing work on land struggles in Africa on our board. We do have some people that have been involved in the ice cream industry also on our board. That's one of the reasons it's unique, of the makeup of the folks on it. But the other way it's unique is that it is a company that is owned by a multinational company. It's a company owned by Unilever. And when they bought the company, we tried very hard to maintain our independence. But when it looked like we had to sell for various legal reasons, we came up with this very unique agreement which gives our board significant powers and significant rights to ensure that the company will operate under a concept that we as business folks have a responsibility to deal with the pressing issues of people on the globe, including climate change, including poverty, including racism, including LGBTQ rights, including all those things that we have a responsibility to do that. And our job on the board is to ensure that that happens. And that's our responsibility.
So I mean, whose responsibility is it? You as a citizen, or as the board?
As the board, and then many of us on the board view it as our responsibility as citizens as well. So we do other things besides just sit on the board. So, but it's our responsibility to ensure that Ben & Jerry's continues to do that, and also to be advocates for the entire private sector world to take a real in-depth kind of commitment to dealing with social justice issues. So that's part of our charge, and it's part of our role, and it's part of what we've been trying to do, understanding the cynicism and the justifiable cynicism many people have about anybody really doing this, but we've been doing it for 40 years as best we can, and we'll continue to push out the agenda.
So you watch over your CEO, for example.
I don't know if you want me to describe it as watching over him. We work together because he knows that's part of the reason that Ben & Jerry's exists. And I've said often in many different contexts that the only reason Ben & Jerry's is relevant is because of our social mission, that the world does not need another ice cream company. It doesn't make any difference whether the Ben & Jerry's is in the freezer case for the struggles of the world. Our only real reason for being is to drive a social mission as actively as we can. So it's not a one-off. It's not a what you do on Sunday after you've exploited people for 6 days of the week. It is an integral part of how we want to run our business.
So is your CEO an activist too?
CEO came through Unilever. The way our agreement works, Unilever appoints the CEO of the company. He didn't have an activist background, but he has been great to work with and has really adopted this way of doing business, and it's been a wonderful, last 8 years working with him. So he's not somebody who's a hindrance to what we're trying to do. He's now become an advocate, and I love working with him. I respect him deeply, and it has been a real journey for both of us to work together.
So we're going to come back to the acquisition of Unilever later. Tell us about your background. You said you've been with Ben Jerry's from the beginning?
From the beginning, I knew them as Ben and Jerry, not a Ben and Jerry's, two human beings, individuals. I met Ben working at a small school in the Adirondack Mountains in northern New York State, a school of 25 students. I took a job there as a bus driver of the school. Ben came along a little later and took a job. He had been a potter, making pots, and was not terribly successful at that. I had a business background, which I rejected doing anything with, and had.
Why?
And that's because I
Did you want to become a millionaire, live the American dream?
well, it was part of me that wanted to do that, but not a big part. It was never a part that made me able to work in any place I had. Yeah, so it didn't. No one would hire me, and I agreed with them.
Did you like after you left high school? Did you ever dream of becoming what you have become?
Absolutely not. So when I left high school, 10 days before graduation, when they threw me out. So.
Oh.
So there's a high school story, there's a college struggle story. I eventually got a degree in business, but I didn't use it.
Why did they kick you out from high school?
Drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a private school. I'd been sent there on scholarship, and they kicked me out 10 days before graduation. But 4 years ago, 54 years after they kicked me out, I was invited back to give the graduation speech, which I did. So
did you tell those students about your?
I certainly did. I told the person who asked me I was going to tell them, and I said, "You can uninvite me," and he said, "No, come," and I went back for the first time. And the nice part of the story is he invited me to speak. I spoke, and then after the speech, when I don't, this is what they do in the U.S. They call each student up and sort of by alphabetical order, and you come and get to the diploma. So after 54 years, they gave me a diploma, and the diploma said, "It's never too late."
But you were still able to go to college without the diploma?
Well, what happened was they didn't put it on my record, and that's why this person who ran the school didn't know that I had been thrown out. But I told him, and I said, "You can uninvite me." But so they didn't put it on my record if I didn't get in trouble over the summer. So I didn't get in trouble over the summer, and then I went to college. And then flunked out of college, but ended up going to a business school because I could get through, and the work was pretty easy, and it was located in Greenwich Village in the 60s. So that's where I was hanging out, and then getting involved. I started to get involved in political stuff around the Vietnam War.
I was going to ask
and
that.
The civil, so I'm helping you out. And so I got involved in the anti-war movement and in the civil rights movement. And workers' rights became a big issue for me, and it still is. So that was sort of my coming out into, or kind of figuring out who I was. It turned out I wasn't a student. It turned out I wasn't a person that wanted to have a traditional job. It turns out that kind of dealing with human struggles is where I found my home.
Do most of your political views from the 60s still remain today?
Pretty much. There a lot of issues I didn't know anything about. I've learned a lot about. particularly LGBTQ struggles. It was in Greenwich Village, and it was where they had the first big riots where gay men were beaten up by the police, and I began to learn about a lot of different issues that I hadn't understood. But the essence of what I now describe is trying to stand in solidarity with those who are marginalized by our various societies. That means that they don't have the same rights and opportunities as white men are still a core of what I'm struggling to do something with. I'm 73 and my peer group is retired, but I still love what I do. So there I go.
So when was Ben & Jerry's founded, and how did it come about?
Well, Ben and Jerry said that they were going to, they wanted to open up a shop, and they wanted to do something around food. And they ended up first thinking about making bagels, but that was too expensive. They didn't have the money to do that. And then they hit on the idea of doing ice cream. And then Ben asked me, he said, "You know something about business, why don't you help us out?" And I said, "Ben, I don't know, I went to business school, that doesn't mean I know anything." And so, but I did help him out. We had to do a business plan, and we had to do, I got him a copy of a pizza parlor business plan, and we took out the word pizza. You had to white it out, that's in those days. And so we changed pizza to ice cream, and number of slices to number of cones, and ovens to freezers, and all of a sudden we had a business plan. But it was only going to be one store. It was never any vision of this thing happening. This was totally, the whole journey has been a fluke.
When was that exactly?
That was, the store opened in May of 1978, so we will be celebrating our 40th anniversary next year.
So the plan was for just this one
One
store.
store in Vermont. And the reason it was picked to be Burlington, Vermont, was no particular thing, except that was the city that we could take some of the students that we worked with. And Ben and I knew the city, because when you took students who wanted to go into town and wanted to go into a little, a city to go to the movies or have a dinner out or something, we'd go to Burlington, Vermont. We said it was a nice place, and that's why it ended up in Burlington.
So, but the place became so successful that you expanded.
Well, the journey was a little more complicated than that. The store, they had the store. They ran it for about 3 years, and then they got burned out. They said, "Oh, we can't do this any longer." And they had no idea how to keep records. And so they used to close the store every once in a while. We've closed today because we got to figure out what's going on. That was a message to the community. And then they decided to sell it. And then in the midst of that sale, which was about 3 years after it opened, Ben changed his mind and said, "I'm going to keep it." And it's when he asked me to get more involved, but keep it under the idea that we're going to run this based on our values. What the heck? I mean, why not try? Why not see if it'll work? Who knows? Right. And we weren't as clear in our articulation of those values and what we were doing, but it just felt like, we have these 60s values, we have these things that we believe in. What's the rule that you can't have that be part of your business? We didn't know that there was no rule. It was right. Just that's the way the private sector operated, and we were just going to operate it differently. So the first thing we did is we had to raise some money as to sell part of the company to the community, which was Vermonters, so that they became part owners of it. And then everybody said, "Oh, what a brilliant idea. Your people who own it are actually your customers." "Oh, that's so clever." And of course we just kind of realized it after, "Oh, that was a really good idea." And we were told we couldn't do it, that we were told it wasn't even going to work. And we were told it was not even legal. But we ended up finding that it was legal, and we ended up doing it, and it ended up turning out to be successful. And that was just sort of the beginning of trying to run this company differently.
But when people came to the store, they could only buy the ice cream there, and not like you didn't like now.
No, there was no pints. It was just there. And then the next expansion from there was Ben had an old station wagon and we'd put some of the ice cream in the station wagon and dry ice and drive it to a few restaurants who agreed to put serving Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and that became the expansion, and then eventually into pints, and now in 35 countries.
So when you said you sold part of your company to people in Vermont,
Mm-hmm.
I know one famous guy from Vermont. That's Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Did he buy a stock?
I don't know if Bernie ever bought some stock. I know Ben knows Bernie pretty well.
Do you know him?
I have not met Bernie. I just know of that, and I know Ben and Jerry were deeply involved in his campaign.
Really?
Yeah, they did. They did. I don't know if you ever heard of what Ben did. This flavor called, which is not related to Ben and Jerry's, because we don't just tell people who they should vote for, but Ben did. So he took a flavor of ice cream, which came out of the concept of the Occupy movement, which was the 1%. So have you heard about this flavor or know what it was? So I'll just describe what it was. It was this is a pint of ice cream, and on the top was about an eighth of an inch of chocolate in just a rim and about there, and it was called Bernie's Yearning. And you open up the flavor, and then you take your spoon, in the back of your spoon, and you whack the chocolate, and you break it up, and you spit it around, and the chocolate represents the 1%. But under Bernie's Yearning, the 1% would be incorporated in the whole flavor, so that the chunks of chocolate would be everywhere, would be equally distributed, and not just on the top for the 1%.
Huh.
Yeah. It's a pretty clever idea.
I like it.
I figured it's good. I'm glad you like it. I think it was a really, really clever representation of that struggle, but it had to be separate from the company, because the company didn't want to take positions on who to vote for.
Right.
We did a lot of work in the last campaign about voting rights. That was a key thing. The right to vote, making the opportunities for people of color, poor people to vote, because in a lot of parts of the U.S., they've made it more restrictive and more difficult for people to vote. So they cut the voting hours. We used to have the voting rights that people struggled through all of the 60s, and then the voting rights they started to cut back on, and there was a big Supreme Court decision which gave an opportunity to cut back on these voting rights. And that's what happened. So we did a lot of work, particularly in certain states that were impacted by cutting down the voting time and openness to it, to open that up and push back on it.
So your company claims that you guys have socially responsible business practices. Could you explain what these are?
Well, so one of our overarching concepts, of which is always a struggle and difficult to do, is that anything we push outside as something that we believe in as a value, we have to look internally to see if we're walking the talk, as some people say. And so if I look internally, here are some things that we work on. We have a living wage policy for our employees.
There's a difference between a minimum wage and a living wage?
Yeah, minimum wage is not enough to survive on. It's as little as one can pay. The term is minimum. We view the living wage as the moral minimum, which is a wage that we calculate that allows someone to live a dignified life, to make sure they have decent housing, to make sure they have enough money for good quality food, for transportation, to go out to dinner with their significant other, whoever they want to. And so it's a deeply ingrained policy in the company to make sure that, and they get good health care and 3 pints of ice cream a day, if as part of their compensation, which they can take and give to their friends or not take. So how we treat employees is a key component, and when we want to expand, we have given Unilever our criteria for what has to be in the factories of anywhere else in the world that makes our ice cream. So that's part of our connecting this part of the conversation to the board. That's our responsibility to make sure anywhere we're making our ice cream has these standards. So that's one of the elements we care about.
Just one thing, like, what is a living wage in Vermont?
A living wage in Vermont is 17. I think it's going to $17, or just went to $17.10 an hour. So that's roughly, 2,000 plus hours that somebody works, because we use it on a 40-hour week basis. So it comes to $36,000, and then you get your health insurance and other benefits on top of that. And that's what you get when you start in Vermont in our factories.
Entry level.
Entry level. That's entry level.
You guys, I read that until 1995 you had like a 5-to-1.
We had a ratio that we did through. It started at 5-to-1 and then went to 7-to-1, and then there was a decision to stop the ratio. It was a big struggle at the organization. People were saying, we're getting so big we can't hire at these numbers, and some of us fought back against it. So finally we came to a compromise, which instead of the ratio issue, we were going to make sure that there was protection for the people at the lower level. And then our ratio was still incredibly low. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's nowhere near 200-to-1. It's like 20 or 30-to-1. Nowadays, I don't even follow it, but I know it's much closer, because our bottom salary with benefits is so high. It's probably close to, as I said, $35,000 in cash, and then health insurance and everything else. So we decided that our key thing that mattered the most to us is to make sure anybody who works at our factory, any pint of ice cream you buy in the world, the people who worked on making that ice cream make enough to live on.
But why? I mean, you want to make money. Why don't you exploit your workers just like everybody else? You could make so much more money.
Absolutely not.
Unilever would be even more happier with you.
That's not true.
Why?
First of all, it's not the reason we do it, but when you treat people fairly, the kind of connection you have with your employees is radically different. And I could sit here and make an economic argument for it, but I don't like to do that, because it's really a moral imperative, not so much an economic imperative. So even if Unilever is right that they could make more money, the idea of running a company, not giving people a fair and decent wage is immoral. And it's exploitive, exactly the word you use. So if your question to me is, why don't you exploit people? I hope that's just because we're getting to know each other.
Right.
And it's not a real, it should be a provocative question to a lot of the private sector. That is, and there's no reason not to make money. Our company is very profitable.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Although or despite you guys paying your workers a living wage.
My answer to you, it's because we pay our people a living wage, not in spite of. I think the thing is, they could do the numbers, and they say, well, if you paid your people the market rate, and I could do it on a piece of paper, but they'd forget all the fact that we don't have the turnover. We have people who care about the product that gets made. There are a lot of other factors that we don't have to deal with in a company, because that's what our company tries to stand for. And so all this was this question about living wages was my first response to how our company tries to internalize the values. The other things we try to do also is to make sure that we are fair traded, to make sure we're non-GMO, to make sure, and we're trying to figure out and learn how we can be impactful in our whole supply chain. So everything we do and everything we touch, that are we respectful and not trying to pay the lowest price to somebody else who we buy supplies for. So we already do pay premiums to our farming community. That are more than you would have to pay because the struggles of small farmers are real, and so we are trying to work with many of our small farmers in Vermont to help them get the best practices on there. And sometimes that costs more money, and sometimes it's our responsibility to look out for our suppliers.
How many people work for Ben and Jerry's worldwide?
I don't know exactly.
Around that?
Well, I would say around 500 or 600, but some people, because of the complications of Unilever, actually work for Unilever, but they're working on Ben and Jerry's, and I don't pay much attention to that. But so in Vermont, we probably have about 300 that are working in our factories. We have 2 large ice cream factories in Vermont. So the number of people, I really don't know, and it changes all the time depending on who's writing their paycheck.
Does Ben and Jerry's produce ice cream in Germany?
It doesn't produce ice cream in Germany. Ice cream in Europe is produced in the Netherlands in Hellendoorn. But some of the ice cream also gets shipped from the U.S. But Hellendoorn is now a dedicated factory to Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
So you said you made the business plan in 1978. Were there like disagreements among you guys among you, Ben and Jerry? Like who came up with the idea of a living wage and all that?
Me. And as a matter of fact, a little story about that is because it was a big issue for me. But so when the company was bought by Unilever in the negotiations, I was part of the negotiations. As I said, we didn't want to sell, and it was an 18-month struggle and debate. But when it finally looks like we were going to sell to Unilever, I was sitting at the board and I said, I'm going to go ask Unilever for one more thing. It's all right for everybody. And everybody said, oh, we're almost done. They probably, what is it? And I said, well, it's about a living wage commitment. And so I said, let me go ask. It's meaningful for me. And they said, okay, you can. And then we were up in these fancy law offices, and they're in one room caucusing and we're hanging out in another room. And so I went into the other room and they said, I asked if I could come in, and yes. I said, what is it? And I said, well, there's something that's important for me, and that is that in this agreement that we're going to work on, that it have a commitment to paying a living wage.
And Unilever was like, what the fuck is he talking about? What the fudge?
Well, they were this is I would never have said that. No, this is but this is the they asked me the question. It was they were pretty burned out. They were struggling along with this. They asked me the question. They said, is this the last thing? And I said yes. It is, as far as I know. And they said, is this a policy you now have? And I said yes. Then they said okay. And then, because I was feeling a little feisty, I said, well, if you don't do it, somebody has to be able to challenge you or sue you. And so I said, I would like to have legal standing to be able to do that. And they agreed to that. And then I guess they must have been tired. I said, look, I'm just a guy on the street, that I can't sue you. I said, would you pay my legal costs? And they said yes.
So in case you need to sue your parent company,
only on the living wage issue.
Okay.
It's not a broad base, but I do have those. legal rights, of which that are now I share with somebody else, and some it'll continue.
Right.
But we pay a living wage, so it's not even an issue. We have a great formula. It really takes into account pretty much, the general needs that an individual would have to to meet their basic lifestyle that's fair and decent and dignified.
So let's talk about the Unilever acquisition. You said over and over again that you guys didn't even want to sell.
Right.
Why didn't you just say no?
Because we were a publicly held company, and there was legal pressure to sell. We had been struggling along as we grew. It was very, very clear that we didn't have anybody to really run the company. We couldn't run the company. I have no ability to run a company, no interest in running a company.
You could have hired
We
someone who knew.
we that is true, but we didn't really at that time. We weren't able to find somebody who knew how to run a company and had the same values that we did, and were willing to actually do it. So we tried. We did a huge search, one of the rare public searches for a CEO. I was in charge of the search. We had over 25,000 applicants,
Wow.
and they could come in any way. And you wrote poems, and one of the applications came in a sheetrock, on a sheet cake, big cake, and then they wrote their bio on a sheet cake, and then people sent uniforms and pictures, and it was a lot of humor in this whole thing, and we still weren't able to really find somebody that we felt comfortable.
None of
in
the
doing.
25,000 people.
We tried, and it didn't work out. It really didn't. It didn't work out. So we were struggling. So we had business issues. So that was part of it too. But part of it, the person that we had put in that position finally really did not have our values. We made a mistake.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We didn't do a good job in vetting who that person came on. He was great at sort of turning the business around and growing the business, but really did not have the same values. So that was a struggle. How were we going to do it? And we looked around the room. We didn't have anybody to step in. We had issues around distribution. Unilever wanted to have what's called a super premium ice cream. So they were either going to come out with one or buy us. So there would have been another big one in the marketplace. And then the legal thing is that we were a publicly held company, so there was a lot of pressure from the stock market people, and we became publicly owned because 20 some odd years ago we had sold part of the company to the community, and they had sold some of their shares, and so we were traded on the exchange, and so that's kind of we kind of felt forced to do it.
You just said that the guy you hired didn't have your values. Why didn't you guys check his values before you hired him?
We screwed up, man.
Really?
We didn't do a good job. We were pretty burnt out. We didn't do a good enough job. No, it's true. That was the beginning. That was sort of the end, rather, of a chain of events of things that we made mistakes on. And so that became a place where, that it was and part of our board wanted to sell it, and we didn't have the ability to say, well, we'll run it, because we knew we couldn't do it, and that wouldn't have been any good. And so when we came up with this sales agreement, we had the hopes. I had very little expectations that it would really happen, but with hopes that we're giving ourselves a chance to maintain our mission, because that's what we cared about. It wasn't running the company that meant something to us. It was having a company that ran like this, and if we could continue to do it under this other mechanism, we were willing to try it.
So it's basically like I have a company,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm forced to sell it, but I make a document where it says, okay, if you buy our company, this needs to happen.
Yes,
So that's what you guys did.
that's what we did.
And Unilever was the only company that was interested?
There was another company that was bidding on it, that was interested in buying it. It was owned by Nestle's. And we asked both
Wow.
companies,
Two giants.
the two ice cream giants, and we asked them both to come up with ways. Nestle's position was that they were willing to put what actually was Dreyer's. Dreyer's is an ice cream that was a big ice cream company in the U.S. That Nestle's owned, didn't own yet, but was clear that they were going to be the buyers of it. Dreyer's said, well, we'll put Ben and Jerry on our board of directors. And Ben and Jerry didn't want to go on their board of directors. They would have been two people. They would have gotten disillusioned in no time. But that was their attempt to do it. And then what turned out was that we were able to do this innovative agreement. And we control 9 of 11 seats, and the agreement goes on in perpetuity. Oh. And so my task now, as the sort of older board member, is I'm I've given a time when I'm no longer going to be on the board, which is June 30th, 2018. I will be 75. The company will be 40 years old. And I will be officially turning over the chair role to somebody else. We've already pretty much know who it's going to be, and I'm already working with her.
Does she have the same values?
She's great.
Right.
She is so...
You don't want to fuck up again.
I don't, man. I don't. And it's the most important thing I think I can do for the company is to try to, make sure that what the company tried to do continues beyond the people. I mean, otherwise it was nice, and she is great. She and I work together all the time, and we just travel to Palestine together, not for Ben and Jerry's, but because we're interested in the struggle going on between Palestine and Israel, and so we've turned out to be incredible colleagues in many ways, even outside of Ben and Jerry's.
You mentioned Israel. I learned that Ben Jerry's produces ice cream in Israel.
Ben & Jerry's has a licensee that produces ice cream in Israel. It's different than Ben & Jerry's. We don't do that. We licensed something back in the 80s because Ben met somebody, an Israeli person, at it was either a bar mitzvah or a wedding or something, and they said, "Oh, I'd like to open up Ben & Jerry's in Israel." And then Ben said, "Talk to Jeff," and he came and talked to me, and I said, "Well, that sounds interesting." And it was no political context. It didn't have the awareness of the situation as it now exists.
So you visited Palestine. There were reports of complaints that you guys sell ice cream in the occupied territories.
Yeah. There were complaints. We do not actually sell ice cream, but there were complaints that our ice cream is sometimes available because it goes through a distributor, but the ice cream isn't really sold there. It's about 2% of the guy's sales there, but we can't stop it. We have this agreement, and it's not much. So we're really not selling in all the occupied territories. But I know people are concerned about it, and legitimately concerned about it. And so, but we are dedicated to working with the Palestinian farmers, and we buy almonds from Canaan, which is a fair traded organization, in Jenin, which is in the northern part of Palestine. And I've been there 3 times. I was originally invited to go on a trip. The way I got engaged in the issue, to understand it, was being invited on a trip with civil rights leaders who were about 5 or 10 years older than me. So the trip was about 20 people, half of them civil rights leaders and half of them Jewish people on this incredible trip to Palestine to learn about the situation and sing civil rights freedom songs with the Palestinian people.
So back to the acquisition?
Yeah, back to the acquisition.
2000. What happened? Like, how did the company Ben Jerry's change after Unilever owned it?
Well, it went through some struggles with the board and Unilever in working together, because you can sign an agreement,
right,
but implementing an agreement, nuancing it and understanding how best to work together took a bunch of years. Right. And so that was a bit of a struggle, and then after about 8 years of that, so Unilever's really owned Ben & Jerry's now for 17 years, 18 years. We ran the company for 22 years or something. It's pretty close to half and half. So it took a while to really figure out how to work together when we had this agreement. And the interesting part of our agreement that I've always felt of why we're working so well together now is because the agreement goes on in perpetuity, and we're forced. There's no separation. I mean, you can't even get a divorce. I mean, it's not like we can take half the company and go run it, and they can take the other half or something. We have to work together. So that has required us to build this understanding. And it's interesting, have these activists and then the Unilever folks and the Unilever folks learning about our business. And it's been a pretty, a surprisingly interesting road. And as I said, I feel so privileged to be working with the CEO now because of the values he now brings to our business. And this feels really good to me. And I'd be straight up if it wasn't.
I mean, you keep repeating that you guys are activists, and I kind of imagine myself, or imagine that the Unilever guys are the capitalists, like who want to make as much money as possible.
Well, Unilever is a publicly held company. Unilever will operate differently, but Unilever is beginning to get more engaged in the role of the company. They just bought Seventh Generation, which is a company in Vermont that deals with sustainability issues. They see it as as a way that many young people are relating to with and how they buy their products and what they like. So there's been a good learning curve for them, and the and here's the most interesting thing is Ben and Jerry's is highly successful financially, it, despite paying people well. But I say because of that and because of all the things we're doing, it's a highly successful company financially.
Like, talk numbers.
Well, the numbers that I know, we have been growing at double-digit rates since for about the last 5 years, which is pretty amazing for a 35-year-old, what is then 35 now, almost 40-year-old company, growing even in the United States where we've been in the market. We've come out with new products, and it it has been a great return on their investment. Probably, although I don't know all the exact numbers, probably the best return on an investment, even though we're a small part of Unilever, that they've ever done and bought with a company. So Ben and Jerry's is not struggling along financially. The odd thing with that's the amazing thing of all the stuff that we're doing is actually helped the company financially. But what if the learning from that is you can make more money by doing this, you will fail. And that's, I think, the struggle that people have to understand, because people will see it for the hypocrisy that it is. If you do it for that reason, even though that happens sometimes, but if you do it for that reason, then you will fail. So it's kind of a paradox in a sense.
Did you guys ever make a huge, maybe financial mistake in the last 15, 20 years that almost cost you the company or something?
No.
Maybe like a wrong product or something.
Oh, we've done, yeah, yes, we've
Yeah.
made we make plenty of mistakes. But they've never been anything of a big magnitude. We did have a financial struggle before the company was sold, when we built a plant and we were way over budget, and that was a shocker for us, and that began the journey to become quote unquote professionally managed. Oh boy, we better get these guys out of here. They don't know what they're doing, and it was the fault of our organization, fault of some of us. Yeah, when we built that plant in the way it went. And so that was the first year we ever theoretically lost money, because we had to fix the plant to make it work. But we have not made any those kinds of mistakes, even though we've taken specific positions on stuff, and some people said, "I'll never buy your ice cream again."
I was gonna talk about that. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that you stand up for LGBT rights,
Yeah,
LGBTQ rights.
yeah.
Are there like conservative Americans who are like, I'm not gonna buy any more of your guys' ice cream,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
and you guys don't care?
Not for, if you're values led, you're values led. And if you don't do something that alienates some people or challenges, you're not really challenging the system. So, that has to be part of what you do. I sometimes say I instead of having 1,000 customers who know about our company, I want to have 100 of them who love our company. And to me, that's a real, you have to take sides on these issues. If you believe that there should be same-sex marriage, you have to say, I believe in same-sex marriage, even though some people may choose not to buy your ice cream
Right.
because of it.
Is there a social issue that you guys abandoned?
I can't remember one that we abandoned. I would say that there is, as we try to deal with what's happening in the world, there is some we focus on more than others, depending on what's going on. So the question of militarism coming out of our country right now is a profound issue. Live in fear every morning of whether we've dropped another bomb on somebody. And we had gone down and taken anti-war stances, particularly in the Iraq War before. But so we're sort of flow with a little bit about what's happening on the streets of the places that we're in, and now we're in a lot of places, so there's a lot of different issues happening, but there isn't anything we never abandon anything because of people saying we're not going to buy your ice cream for it.
I mean, I went to high school in Texas in 2002, 2003, right when the Iraq War started. And I was one of the few students in the school that were like, I don't know about that war. I don't know if it's justified. Like I wasn't really anti-war because I was too young to be politically active. But I mean, you guys were anti-war. I mean, I can imagine that. I mean, there were like
we're anti-military budget all the time in our country, even if there's no war. I mean, we can. We spend so much of our money on building incredibly more weapons to killing incredibly more people incredibly quicker. And so, that's the country I live in. That's the U.S. That's the country that's, if you look at its history, is usually at war. We don't know not being at war. That's a rare moment in our history when we're not at least fighting one war. We're now fighting several.
Other like special flavors, or is there like a new flavor coming out, like the mother of all ice creams, or mother of all flavors, or a drone flavor or something?
I know, it would be nice to drones. That's a whole nother topic. No, I don't think we've got a flavor that I know in the pipeline about our anti-war stances. The best we're doing and closest thing is probably coming out with a flavor in the U.S. honoring Bob Marley. We did have a flavor in the U.K. about it. Now we're expanding that. Bob Marley, One Love, and so, so we will honoring the Bob Marley family, and that'll be coming out in the U.S. And that was out in the U.K., and then we worked with the Bob Marley family to provide resources. They took a royalty and provided it for Jamaican young people to use the arts, and that music and arts, to use for social change. And actually, I was able to go to the camp in Jamaica as one of the tough jobs.
Right.
I had to go to Jamaica with the person that's sitting over there, Carrie, and we were in Jamaica with the 40 young people at this camp. I said some representative from Ben & Jerry's has to go, and I said I'm willing to go in February to Jamaica and hang out in Jamaica. Yeah, it's tough work, This business world is tough on you.
Since you mentioned Bob Marley, is there ever gonna be like a cannabis flavored ice cream?
Right now it is not even in the planning stages.
But is it possible? Can it be done?
I assume it can be done. If you can put cookie dough into ice cream, I assume you can put cannabis into ice cream. But it is not, it is really not something that I've seen on our agenda as coming up.
I was just curious.
No, I understand. It's a legitimate question. I hope if there was, you might choose to try some. Just
Whenever I'm in Colorado.
Yeah, well, wherever you're comfortable.
So I'm also a big fan of genetically modified ingredients. What do you guys don't have that?
Why don't we have that? Yeah. Essentially, the reason is, one, there's the question of the health. There's also the economics of the struggles of small farmers and whether genetically modified. I mean, if you think about what happened in India with those who planted genetically modified plants and the suicides it caused because they couldn't meet their their bills and the debt that they had to do this. So, we can grow enough food in the world without using chemicals and without bowing to Monsanto.
So you guys don't work with Monsanto or farmers who use Monsanto products?
We do not. As a matter of fact, many years ago, we were in a big fight with Monsanto. We're a little company because of BGH, which bovine growth hormone, given to cows so they can get more milk out of them. We were opposed to using BGH in our product. Monsanto was challenging us, saying you can't put no BGH on your product because you can't prove that it's unhealthy, and it implies that it's unhealthy. And so we had whole sorts of legal fights with Monsanto around it. So we're working.
Did you guys win?
As a matter of fact, yes, we were able to claim, and so you will see in products that they say that they don't use BGH, they don't use dairy from farms that have used BGH in their way they farm and with their cows. So I'm not so big on chemicals into into the food system. I think there's a real line we should draw around it. And
I have some small questions left.
yeah.
Do any of your profits go to NGOs or go all your profits to Unilever?
We have part of the sales agreement calls for the continuation of the Ben and Jerry's Foundation, which is an independent part of the company. And it existed before Unilever. We always kept it independent. We didn't want to use this money that sometimes gets caught up into marketing and confused, so it was done separately. We are an amazing foundation. I'm a trustee of the foundation. Jerry's a trustee of the foundation. And there were two other trustees, but it's the men and women who work in our plants and other places that make the decisions of where the money goes, and we just agree with whatever they decide to do because they're the ones that are working every day and should make the decisions. We do give a rubric to what we would fund, and generally the rubric is to fund small organizations where we can be impactful. So not large NGOs. We don't have that kind of money, and we prefer to do it really at the grassroots level. We want to fund groups that are dealing with social justice issues, and we want to find groups where the people who are impacted by the social injustice are the ones working to ameliorate the impactfulness. And it's there, we want to support them, not the large NGOs where there's a bunch of people coming in saying, we're here to help you. It's rather, we need to help us. And so our foundation has been amazing over the years. The groups that it has funded and willing to take risks. We're not like other foundations. We don't ask for big, lengthy reports. We understand the struggles, or sometimes your successes are really hard to measure. But we want to support those folks who are actually doing the work because they're facing the struggle.
And I read about there was a feud between Ben & Jerry's and Häagen-Dazs.
Oh, man.
Can you tell our viewers about that?
Oh yeah, sure. That now you're bringing my memory way back. So when Ben & Jerry's started to grow, Häagen-Dazs was then owned by Pillsbury. Pillsbury's icon is what they call the doughboy, the white sort of chef-looking things, that baking bread. And Häagen-Dazs had told their distributors, the people that took the ice cream from the factory and brought it to the supermarkets, that if they carried Ben & Jerry's, they would stop selling them Häagen-Dazs. And Häagen-Dazs was much bigger than we were and much more powerful, and the distributors would have had no choice. And this could, the courts could look at this and say it's an antitrust violation and you can't do it legally, but that would take years. So we started the legal process, but we also started a campaign that talked about what's the Doughboy afraid of, because it was the Doughboys icon of Pillsbury, and they owned Haagen-Dazs at the time, much bigger company. And so we started this campaign to start it. When we came up with what the line would be, Jerry said he was willing to go to Pillsbury's headquarters and march in front of the Pillsbury's headquarters with a sign, a sandwich board on, and hand out things. And we called a press conference. Only one member of the press came, but it became a big story all over the place. What's the Doughboy afraid of? And it turned out, legally, we think we were really correct, but we never had to get to court because the pushback from the public of what's the Doughboy afraid of, and this is all before social media, so
Right.
it was a very different.
Was it in the 80s, 90s?
Yeah, it was in the 80s.
Right.
And you could dial a free number and get a what's the Doughboy afraid of kit, and we did all this stuff and became a big thing. And
It worked?
and it worked 100%. We came to an agreement about it. We did have a real large law firm backing us up, and it would have taken all of our profit to pay the law firm if we ever went to court. But fortunately, we never had to go to court, and we got back on the trucks. And I guess maybe they had a legitimate reason to be afraid of Ben and Jerry's at that time, because we are now a real competitor of theirs worldwide, although they are still much bigger. And now Haagen-Dazs is connected to Nestle's, and Ben & Jerry's is connected to Unilever, and so the world still seems to be marching on.
And tell me about Earth Day 2005. There was a baked Alaska, like the biggest baked Alaska of all time or something.
I don't remember that. We had something when this was in 2005.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we did but we did do what I do remember is built the world's biggest ice cream sundae, which we built back in the 1980s. It was in the springtime outside in a pool. There wasn't no water in the pool, and I don't know, it was 27,000 pounds of ice cream for the whole community. It was done on April 15th, which is tax day. And there was a recession at that time, and it was billed as lick the recession. And so we had this world's biggest ice cream sundae. I don't remember the Baked Alaska event, but
People can Google it.
huh?
People can Google it.
Yeah, I'm going to Google it now. So I have a little memory refreshing.
And one last topic: do you guys support children's rights?
Do we support?
I mean, there's like a famous UN convention on the rights of the child, and there are 3 countries in the world who hasn't ratified it. That's Somalia, South Sudan, and the United States of America.
It is an obvious thing we would support. We have not been asked to support. I don't think we have a formal resolution on the board.
I ask you now to support it.
I completely. The idea of not supporting children's rights, it feels like, of course. I mean, the fact that the United States often didn't even sign on the UN all the UN human rights.
Right.
So that's a more profound question. Why isn't the United States signed on all the human rights, which includes child rights, which includes living wage rights, as a matter of fact, which includes rights of return for places where you've been dispossessed. The United States hasn't done that. I would love the United States and the whole world to live by that document and would support it, and that would include the rights of so many groups that are marginalized in our world.
Jeff, thanks so much.
Thank you.
One last personal question.
Sure, go.
Who did you vote for last year in the presidential election? Did you vote?
Yes. I didn't. Don't even accept Donald Trump as my president.
You don't?
I don't accept somebody who could say the things that was said during his election. And what I sometimes say, we wouldn't hire him at Ben & Jerry's with the kind of attitude and racist attitude and the things that he would say about women, disabled people, people from other countries, African American people, should never be a president of anything. So I did not vote for him.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.